Agro Ecology, Kalakantha.
Hare Krishna. So Dharma and ecology. Well, actually, something to be said on that meeting in Germany when I met some Sundar people who were doing such a beautiful work in Europe. I thought, I want to drop this GBC work and just surrender to his work. It's so-called a turnaround that I came to do this service, and we have been working together ever since. And he's a very valuable resource for our society in terms of crop protection and agriculture. So, as you have noticed, we started with a little history and the philosophical aspects, and both speakers were giving some of that history and philosophy behind crop protection. I move now a little bit into the conceptual dynamics, and in the afternoon we go a little bit into practicals. So the way the day was organized, we have the research on how the DHA influences our capacity to learn transcendental thoughts coming from scientific academic research. That's one presentation. Git and Agri was supposed to present today, but they have a little challenge, so they're coming tomorrow. But that also goes in the practical line. And then we have the experience in Europe with Sundar Prabhu. And Varshanu Swami said he might come and talk about bulls. So which originally we had in mind to bring institutions like Tiller's International, but they were exactly having an event on this same day, so it was amazing. In any case, bulls are a very major part of this equation and need a lot of attention. Dharma ecology. Well, when we think of Dharma ecology, or especially ecology, it comes like a child. It's just started walking recently. And the invisible backbone on that child is what they call eco-spiritualities. A diverse group of ideas, but within that, ISKCON has a lot to offer. And the thing is there any connection between then sustainability and what we do? Well, as you know, sustainability from the verb sustain, derives from the English verb to sustain, yeah, sustenance, and Sanskrit dharma derives from dri, which is also to sustain. So there is a connection between dharma that holds and sustainability. And when we talk about dharma, I'm shifting to dharma, to greatly spoken about dharma, we are defining a few boundaries, because dharma is a gigantic subject, which even Bhishmadev at the time of passing away said, well, that's the most difficult topic to understand. So what we want to say in this presentation for dharma is the innate characteristic of a being or a thing. And when we check with Webster what he says conformity to one's duty and nature. It's very much similar to what we had here in our Vedic Siddhanta. Prabhupada at times refers to that as occupational duty. And he says, constitutional duty, that is called dharma, functional duty. So he brings in many, many terms, occupational, constitutional, and functional. And that is an interesting concept, because an occupational duty infers nature, infers a particular role in the universe. And sustainability has a lot of interconnections into that. So, to exemplify, let's say we look at the fire. What is the dharma of fire?
Heat and light.
Heat and light. Without heat and light, fire is not fire. Something very innate, intrinsic to fire. Right? Great. Speaking about constitutional duty, Prabhupada does speak about our nature. He does speak about transcendental, eternal dharma. That was the topic of today's morning Bhagavatam class, right? But he also speaks about our occupational duty. that nature which we acquired from our conditional connection with this world. So on one hand, we see a connection between sustainability and Dharma. They both have a similar root. What about ecology? What would you say ecology means? Yes?
Study of the ecosystem.
Study of the ecosystem. All right, that's a very good way of looking at it.
I would venture to guess it would entail a lifestyle in harmony with nature.
Okay, we have that conception of ecology, of harmony, of relationship, that's there. And when we look at the origin of this word, the word oikos means a house. And logia, study. So the study of the house. In other words, you have a look at your environment and you start to analyze that environment. And naturally, when there's harmonious relationship, the environment is in balance, we call, oh, it's an ecological environment, because the relationships are kind of in balance. So it does infer, it does bring a sense of balance. It does sense, when the house is in balance, we tend to call that ecological. Now, this house that you see here is a house in Brazil, in the Amazon forest, from the Yanomamis. The Yanomamis are native Brazilian Indians which live in the forest, Amazon forest, and they build houses in a very ecological, very natural way, in a way which is very much in harmony with nature. And that meant for them having 300 species of cassava. Are you familiar with cassava? Yes, everybody? Brazilians, like, it's a staple food with all the system. But we can even do lasagna of cassava. It's something that you should try one day. Cakes for ekadasis and so many things. It's considered a poor man's fridge because you just pluck the cassava and then you cook it, and you can leave it there for a long time and you just harvest as you need it. But they had 300 types. Now imagine, one was more yellowish, suggesting better carotene, and many different nutritious values in cassava. They could make all kinds of dishes. How did they do that? That house was in balance. And today, some sociologists even attempt to say that Amazon is not a random forest, but when they do some pictures around some specific locations, they find concentric rings of trees. And how did that come about? So there are rubber trees and palm trees and medicinal trees which repeat itself in a cylindrical form, suggesting they had a system which is called the itinerant agriculture. They did a plot here, they did a plot there, and it was just moving on. And at the end of the day, they had a whole forest system around them, a food forest. So that house was very much in balance. But when you look at today, that's a picture of today. Our house is definitely not in balance. It's starting from, and we don't need to talk much about this, a topic you've been discussing a lot. If you look at this picture, who would think that poisoning your food is something that we want? And we do it in grand style with an airplane, just to show that, yes, we do it, massive poisoning. Or, who would think that we need a plant that will mature exactly in the same second? All the individuals are exactly in the same second. And I need a combiner to come and harvest it just in one moment. Because otherwise, one is big, one is small. What is the sense of this big machine? Now, think about it. This is gluten intolerance. Before, everybody had their native varieties of plants, but now we have 1 or 2 species all over the world. Ayurvedic says you need to eat the species in your locality. Major transgression in nature's law. Look at the tractor. Sounds interesting, attractive, helpful, handy. I always have a nice discussion with my farmers, especially when they wear socks of caterpillar or hats from John Deere. We have good discussions on this topic. What is a tractor and what is the benefit or non-benefit? And we're going to talk a little bit about this gentleman over here. And we could go on, and there's so much publications on this that we don't need to talk about this. We could talk about cancer, we could talk about Parkinson. All of that is coming from that house, which is not in balance. Now, where did this come from? Where does all this come from? With one idea. One idea. You see the power of ideas. One simple idea. What is the idea? Well, we need something which is more voluminous. And the idea came, what if we change from animal power, human power, to something more stable, something more reliable, fossil fuel. So we go from animal power to fossil fuel power. That was the idea. And from that one idea, you have a whole industrial development, which is the picture we just saw. And that was philosophically embedded by the positivism, reductionism, mechanicism. Everything is in a box. I can just work the system and I'll have what I need. Reality is, so many years later, that hasn't really been the case. The amount of diseases and anxiety and unemployment and unbalance, ecological disaster is still there. That really didn't solve it. Now, this movement of the pendulum created an equally potent pendulum movement on the other side. The British people came to Canada and they found one manufacturer of that gentleman we're talking about, the tractor, and he said, you know what, you got something that nobody else has. That little gear at the back, the power force of the tractor, you know, this company in Canada got it down. So now the tractor was not only like this machine, like almost like a train on wheels. If you see the first pictures, it's a humongous machine. They got down to a smaller machine, better than Ford. Ford had Harrison in America, and in Canada, Massey had this other model, which was interesting. So the British Empire said, yes, you are our supplier of tractors around the world, and we're going to send you to teach the native barbarians from India, everywhere else, how to do farming. This is the system. With that mandate came Sir Albert Howard to India. Botanist, British, very gentle, which is kind of an exception, but he was very gentle. And he came to India and he looked around and he came to Indore. Indore is like Madhya Pradesh, it's a central place in India, and he observed the farmers. And he came to a conclusion. Here's a beautiful book called An Agricultural Testament. And he compares the forest as his blueprint to analyze agriculture. And he says in that book, I found so many insects. I found no pests. How interesting. He was completely bewildered. How is that possible? And all he did was make a survey with the farmers and realize that their farming system, their biomass management was enough to keep the pests away. And then he composed a system called the indoor system for sugarcane, for cotton, blah, 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 all that. And he brought that back to England as the first organic movement that we know in the West. From him, it goes to France. Germany was kind of stirring things out with Albert Steiner and his anthroposophic movement, biodynamic movement, and they merged and became a big organic movement which gets some visibility around the 60s, 70s is when it starts to go up, but it really started in the 30s. That was a pendulum. Now for this pendulum, the important thing is environment, quality. We want quality back. Not just quantity, we want quality back. And many researchers started to study that the short molecules of amino acids in the fruit, which is so beautiful on the shelf, actually didn't give a proper nutrition. On the contrary, because it was inhibited by excess of nitrogen, you inhibit zinc, which is fundamental for your growth. copper, and many other micronutrients. So eating that actually blocks some neurological functions, some metabolic functions. And they wanted quality. And of course, that was the organic farming. We had natural farming in Japan with Fukuoka. We have the biodynamic, naturally in Germany. Permaculture. Chandramauli Swami was speaking about the proximity of the Goshala and the devotees. And permaculture understood that. If you see every day your crops, you know it's thirsty, I need to water it. Oh, it's time to harvest, let me harvest. So the vegetable garden is put right near your path. So you can't avoid it, but see it. The same with the cows. If they're there and you're interacting with them, it creates a symbiosis. And that's what's in India. Every Indian person knows that the kitchen door is the Goshala. The cows live in the back of their house. And every day they're a family member. And if you walk in Mayapur, you can still see it. The villagers are fighters brushing their teeth, taking buckets, washing the cows, taking care of the cows, milking them, but they're a family member. And that proximity is really important. That was designed by Bill Mollison. And recently, now, permaculture, which had one small limitation, which was size. Okay, we can do permaculture gardens, how big? 20 hectares? Maybe. 50 hectares? 10,000 hectares was already, I don't know about that. But a gentleman in Brazil called Ernest, he developed a system also based on the forest called syntropic farming. Syntropic, with tropic, with the genesis of life. So he, with syntropic farming, he developed a system which can be applied in a farm of 15,000 hectares. And the results are under study, naturally. There are different opinions about the system, but it's going out there quite nicely. From all of that, a system was born in America, a lot in America, called Agro Ecology. And Agro Ecology, with Miguel Altieri was one of the big names, and all this from California and from different researchers, they started to understand that we need more than just substituting one nutrient for another. You take urea and you put another source of nitrogen. We need a little more. So they went into ecology, indigenous knowledge. And then he starts to discuss how the Indian people used to produce things, how the native Indians, how the Indians in traditional villages were producing. And yeah, pretty much that. So agroecology became more like a movement which embraces ecosystems. So now we're shifting to ecosystems. But still, something is missing. What about man? Man is an essential ingredient of the system. And where is he here? So far we're talking of techniques, talking of nutrients, processes. What about the human being? Therefore, I'm proposing Dharma and ecology. Because Dharma would now address us as a person with an occupational duty on the planet, interacting with all the other elements of nature which also have their occupational duties. So I think that's a natural flow of thought in our contemporary thought. And we're going to explore a little bit about this today. There you are, India. Look at the amount of energy which is present. Look at all those bulls. Beautiful. Their horns are super amazing. They're bred for the horns, this breed. And look how many people working with them. So there was a natural ecosystem of people and bulls, engagement, power. It's a powerful, it's not just like carrying a little box. Look at that amount of sugarcane they're processing. It's huge. It's powerful. But then, again, that was the transformation. Now look at that. Much less people, you know. Of course, this tractor is an Indian tractor. When you put here the Australian tractor, or the European real, the real guys, or the American tractor, then you say, wow, I didn't want to go that far. That was the simple idea. Let's go from here to here. When you look at agroforestry systems, that's what the world is looking at now. Agroforestry systems can be something like this. rows of trees with areas that can be cultivated in the middle. Now the rows of trees is considered a permanent biomass factory because they are bringing the nutrients up, and not only one type of plant, but many different types of plants. And so one brings zinc, one brings molybdenum, one brings potassium. So they are bringing the nutrients up. And then you chop and drop. Chop, that's Tiago Barbosa, right? Chop and drop, chop and drop. So you are creating a permanent machine of fertilization. And in the middle rows, you can put vegetables. He's trying grains. In a new development, he's trying to put grazing lands in the strips. So we are looking at this system. It can be a great thing for us. Okay? But that's an agroforestry system in comparison with today's agriculture. Isn't it? You put corn here, strawberries there, and everything is working as little separate parts. But the car, to function, needs everything assembled in its place. So the machine of nature needs a lot more than just separate systems. And that's why we're having problems. But we don't recognize that because we can't see a solution. Say, no, not possible. How are you going to feed the world, and so many other pieces that we have no time to really go into. But the point is, we need to see as an agro system, not like separate parts. Yeah? Here's a question for all of us. Why is the forest in balance?
By design. By Krishna's design.
By Krishna's design, okay? And what is it in Krishna's design that makes it work?
Diversity.
Diversity? Good point.
Dharma.
Dharma. Who said Dharma? Dharma. Let's investigate that proposition.
Animals also.
The animals also. Biodiversity, which ties in what you said.
Well, it's cyclical. I mean, it's producing things that are,
Cycle.
and then you have elements within the forest that balance. So the balance isn't just on one level. If you've got multidimensional balance, which goes back to Krishna, provides the bounty for that cyclical nature to exist.
Everyone has a reason.
It's untouched by human hands.
You're probably human, right? Have to keep them out.
That's the solution.
The solution is just keep. Actually, that idea is not a foreign idea. When you look at ecological groups, the forest becomes the sacred space. So we shouldn't touch it because we don't touch the sacred space. And then you have all these ideas, no, let's preserve everything. If you keep all the forests in place, that's the ideal. But the Prachetas didn't think like that, right? The
I was going to ask you, how do you know it's in balance?
How do you know it's in balance? Very simple. It sustained itself over time. The species are in a, how can I put it? In a populational dynamics which is balanced. And you see that it can reproduce itself in a way which there is variety, diversity, and subsistence over the period of time. And as other systems, if you abandon it, it just drops. Like if you don't plant corn, you don't have corn. It depends on humans for cultivation. It's an autonomous system.
What?
Okay, but let's go on. I know where you're gonna get. So I'm gonna get to you.
The question is, who does it benefit? That's what you would think, right?
Yeah.
Does it benefit?
What's the point of having huge forests, as you said? The Prachetas after 10,000 years of meditation, they came out and torched the whole lot. Not just because they had nothing to do, but because you needed another balance. That other balance that you've got to grow food and you've got to have pasture. And in that report, Prabhupada says clearly, people think that the rain and the whatever else he says, the rain is something else comes because the forest brings the rain, and that he says it's wrong. And his argument is because it rains in the ocean. There's no forest. So in fact, it's one type of balance, but it's not necessarily a Brahminical balance, because if you want to use...
But I didn't say that. I didn't say why the forest is Brahminical balance. I just said why the forest is in balance. That was my question. And
it's good for the worms, but I don't know what it's good for the Brahmins.
yes, okay. You have to see that the native Indians were living in the forest. They would burn the forest like the Prachetas, but in a controlled way. And the result was Terra Preta de Índio, which means the black soil of Indians. I've seen photographs of a black profile soil as deep as this room. There's a gentleman sitting there, the photo goes 2 meters high of man-built black soil. How did they do that? By a very interesting system of balance. Now, yes, cycles. I mean, everybody said the cycle of water, the cycle of nutrients, the cycle of the forest itself, succession. Which plants comes to give space to another. When a tree gets old, what happens? It falls. When it falls, what happens? The sun, it's a clearing. The sun comes and new species come up. So there's a whole succession plan there. The GBC should have studied the forest. Other people, other people are studying the forest.
You can tell them to have the next UBC meeting in the forest.
That's going to be an excellent idea, and observe the different species there. Actually, I can tell you, Maharaj, that we had a meeting in Canada with Bhakti Mark Swami on a native oak tree forest in, where is he? Right there, on his house. Wasn't it an oak?
Yeah.
Yeah. We just sat there. We didn't speak a word. The energy was transformed. We felt in harmony just sitting there. And there's a sense of happiness. And we just said, wow, that's how we're going to convince people that this is the right thing to do. Just bring them here and observe yourself. So the environment of meeting does have a big influence on your decision. I fully agree. Yes. So here they're trying to imitate the forest with syntropic farming. And they try to create a system with a lot of knowledge of succession, of different layers in space, different crops, and that could be something to look at. 5 principles: soil is always covered, photosynthesis has to be maximized, intensive cropping, natural succession, stratification, and management. You have to manage that. So we're looking at those systems as modern agricultural system, which we really need to observe and see what role we have to play there. Why is the forest in balance? Now, what about this? That's your point. Can you read it for us? With a French accent?
Each species is doing their functional duty according to their nature.
How about that? So that's balance. Like this. When you look at an atomic level, there is something programmed in the atomic level which makes things go in balance. It's coherence. There's coherence there. Similar to the DNA. It is replicating life, but it's following a certain principle. So every little molecule in that DNA is actually responding to something. That could be Dharma. There's a law in nature which is from moving us around. But then who taught succession to the forest? You cut the Amazon forest today, leave it there, cut part of it. If you leave a part of the Amazon forest, it has the power to regenerate. Who taught that to the forest?
It's innate. It's innate.
Innate.
Yeah.
Intrinsic.
Intrinsic, it's innate, it's there. Yeah, but who taught that to them? Who put it there?
If it's intrinsic to their nature, it doesn't have to be taught. It's built into the DNA of all the different parts.
Krishna answers that in the Bhagavad Gita. Purushottam Kshetra, could you read this?
This material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again.
There you go. Yeah. So that's where there is a blueprint in the universe, which science tends to get parts of it, not the whole picture, but we could. And when we are ready to be in that discussion of ecology with examples, they'll come and hear what we have to say about this more subtle philosophical understanding of that. That's another tool. This morning this presentation hearing about the 3 modes, cow protection, the 3 modes, a very important tool. It helps us a lot in our understanding of how it could be used. Like the forest in Europe has a certain dynamic which is different from the tropical forest I was showing. The breeds in Europe have a different nature from the breeds in India, South America. For example, in Russia, when it's minus 20, in Siberia, the cows are happy and gray and out. Minus 20, I mean, with the South American conditioning, I'm almost like dead, I can't even think of anything. My only experience was in Belarus. I went there and I wanted to take my gloves off just to take a photo. When I put my hands back in the glove, your hand doesn't stop hurting, for that hour it's like, and it doesn't go away. So I said, this is not for me, absolutely not for me, this environment. So the 3 modes can tell a lot to us about what to do. In Canada, minus 35, is it? Another concept which we've been discussing, syntropy and entropy.
Explain.
An entropic energy, it leads to death, it finishes itself. And as entropic energy multiplies itself. Ultimately, the universe has an entropic movement, it's the annihilation, and then it starts again as entropic. But when you look at materials which produce entropic responses, we all came here by car, right? That energy which you put in the car, it's gone. You can't get it back. You have to go to work, put more, right? And it's a very entropic. Prabhupada used to call it ugra karma. And that's another dimension to it. It's very hard to acquire it. And there's a certain nature to that energy, which is, it will finish. And if it will finish, you have a feeling of scarcity. It's gonna finish. So there's a scarcity mode. People tend to be more impersonal, locked in. I have to keep because it will finish. That's what we live today in today's world. You get a bigger salary, it doesn't produce that feeling, oh, I have more money, I have to distribute it immediately. Neighbor, I got some more money. Are you interested? You want some green notes? Have you experienced that? Not recently? Not yet. Well, when you're Swami, sometimes you do, right? People come to you and say, oh, Maharaj, I have here something for you. It happens. In India, it happens a lot. Otherwise, this entropic movement is just, look at the seed. What happens to a seed? It's one seed. And you get thousands, hundreds, depending on the plant. So it creates abundance. Have you ever gone to a farmer who had a big crop and you go to his property? What does he do? Please take some. Please take some. I have so much. Please take some. Isn't it? And that's the nature. Why is that? The energy he's dealing with is entropic. We are dealing with entropic energy, so it's hard to give. We have to work hard. Hard technology. All this is hard to maintain, hard to keep. So Prabhupada's vision for here was, let's get entropic. Let's grow our own food.
If you look at visibility and invisibility as, it's in the Gita, but the unseen hand of God in a sense, right? So that if you look at energy as manifesting in a certain way, it's interesting that you draw this contrast between entropy and syntropy. That's from an energy perspective. But if you really think about even growing things, if you plant a seed, it takes a little time, but within a couple of days or a couple of weeks, it just appears, right? To the average eye, it seems like it's miraculous. But that's, to me, would be the unseen hand of God, right? So there is divine grace that's provided so that that plant can grow a certain way. So I like this contrast between visible and invisible because...
And that's what we're not looking at.
Yeah.
We are looking at a society, even our ISKCON spiritual society, and we're not aware that this kind of energy has an influence of our consciousness. We're taking for granted that it's just what is the technical term we say? Yukta Vairagya, right? We use it, but we don't analyze that it has an influence on our consciousness. And Prabhupada was thinking, if you can live here in a symbiotic way with nature, producing your food, your cloth, your milk, everything, that will be a great preaching. And that's what we experience with the Amish community. We travel from India, from Australia, from the UK, from New York, so many places to observe, from California, and talk to them. They didn't have to go where we came to them. And they earn $2 billion per year with people like us who went to see them. We didn't pay anything because he was a friend, but people do pay. And in Lancaster, is the main center, it's almost $2 billion every year. Now ISKCON is worth $2 billion, according to some, in terms of building, assets, and etc. So it's an ISKCON per year. They make one ISKCON per year just from people who want to see them. Because they're kind of different, they're kind of connected to Earth. So in terms of marketing, there's a huge scope for us to be authentic and to generate resources from that. But we have to look in a certain direction. And now we talk about ecology, we talked about sustainability, dharma. What about the cows? Is there a relationship between cows and dharma? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Who said yes? Yes. Strong yes. Yes? We saw some in the class a little bit. Do you remember any of them?
All enterprises are centered or are grown around the cow. Without the cow and the bull, really nothing happens because the cows, they fertilize the ground. All the enterprises in the world are based around the cow, as far as I can understand it.
Interesting thought. Yeah, interesting thought. The thought that the cow is wealth, and the belief among us spiritualists that real wealth is cows and land. That has to be actually Vijnanized in our movement. To start, we saw today morning Dharma, the personification, the bull is the personification of Dharma. That's a strong connection between Dharma and the cows. Isn't Mayapur, isn't he charming? Comes from, I think he comes from Gujarat, a special breed for the horns. Concrete, yes. The verse, also a verse of the Bhagavatam. Krishna, what does he do every day? He milks the cows with Balaram, right? And sometimes they have competitions and they squirt the milk sideways and they start trying to milk at each other. And there's that verse that the cow is beneficial because one can draw the religious principles from her. And in that purpose, every Sanatani should have a cow in his house. He said that. So that's a responsibility for everyone. Yes. Now in the Bhagavatam, Krishna also is saying that in the Panchagavya, he is the ghee. No, sorry. In the sacrificial elements of a yajna, he is Panchagavya. Especially the ghee. He is that. So we can see this interconnection between Dharma, the cows, and between Krishna. We said today, Namo, Namanya, Jagat Vitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Krishna does that through the agency of the cows and the Brahmins. And he is Jagat Vitaya, the protector of Jagat, through the agency of the Brahmins and the cows. And that was the topic of this morning class. And also, Akila Dharma Bhavanam, Krishna, who is the master of religious principles, Krishna gives people walking on the earth. Now, did you know that?
Yes.
Yes, everybody knew? Some didn't, right? Yeah, it's interesting. Also, for some time, like, I thought, really? Yes.
We actually heard it, we learned it the hard way, because we have horses and they have boats, and they can bite you, they can nip you. And we thought, like, when we first got the cows, it was like, they don't actually have opportunity. You can like put your hand in and they'll never bite you. But the horses will nip you because they have the boats. So we got nipped by the horse.
Oh, because then you thought the horse must be similar
Yeah.
to the cow, so
Like,
now you know. All right. Yeah, there's a purpose to that. And when you look at the science today, if a grassland is eaten up to 50%, okay, only, the roots don't stop growing. If the cows eat 70% of that pasture land, they stop, 50% of the roots stop for 17 days. And if they 90%, the whole root system stops for 17 days. So you see an intimate relationship between the cows, what they do, and the grass. And that leads to a discussion that we have today about how grass and milk and intelligence can be interconnected. I'll skip this one because of time. Gita Nagri was going to come today, but because they couldn't, I merged the two presentations of GIV in one, and you'll hear from them tomorrow. Prabhupada was here in Vrindaban, and we heard how he spoke about self-sufficiency. We have Yudhisthira Prabhu was at the beginning, Ranaka Prabhu was here, Chandamali Swami was here, Tapan Pujan Prabhu was here from the pioneering age. He was really speaking quite strongly on how to live off the land. And sentence like, if human society wants to be exalted, the leaders of society, he doesn't say the leaders of the Hare Krishna movement, the leaders of society must follow the instruction of Bhagavad Gita and give protection to the cows, the Brahmins and Brahminical cows. Sure. So Prabhupada is not looking at the Hare Krishna movement, a bigger picture. And then he writes in 76, can you read it for us, this letter?
There are already dozens of such centers and farms where we are protecting cows, like our new Vrindaban community in West Virginia. Bhakti Vedanta Manor in London. Altogether, over 14 such projects have been started throughout the world to date.
So 14, right? So there was about 14 projects. So that's our statistics. 76, we had 14. And there he is. I always hear that the first cow was Kaliya, is that correct?
Yes.
But then the Surabhi 1, 2, 3, 4 came the next, is it? Oh, Kaliya was one of Surabhis. I was confused in the presentation.
I think she was.
She was one of the 4.
I wasn't there at the time.
Yes, you did.
I was one of the first milkers here in Vrindaban in 1971. We had 6 cows. That's Kali. Actually, the first cow we got was Kamaduk. She was a Jersey cow. That's Kali. And then there was Vasya, Satya, Sukla, and Malika, I believe. And I bought one of those original sticks when I started my homestead right here. So, yeah.
So that's interesting. We always hear that Kaliya was the first cow. She was not the first cow.
She was the one that was very Prabhupada.
Lighter.
Took her milk and said her milk was the best.
Okay.
And she's the one that really Prabhupada when Prabhupada came. It is so much better. Prabhupada had a nice relationship.
With her, I remember someone asking, who is she? My friend Kaliya, that's a famous statement. Yeah, so there he is. Now, Prabhupada is here looking at the future, so he's looking at this moment and thinking, what can we do in the future? What is his vision? Govinda Dasi was also investigating this topic, so she had a conversation with Prabhupada. Chandramali Swami, could you read the first quote of Prabhupada?
Prabhupada, but the whole New Vrindavan idea was that milk and production, something from that, that's all, and that is possible, but they don't work.
So Prabhupada already was kind of seeing that there was a resistance to work in this area, right? And could you read the second quote? The same conversation.
And that's the trouble. So you can see it as that, if that is why they think now we have become devotee of Krishna, why shall we work?
Right?
That's why I came to Vrindaban.
Finish material life, no more work, right? Okay. Yeah, so Prabhupada was aware, and up to this point in time, it's one of the major complaints I hear in farm. We don't have people, you know. So there seems to be something you need to look at this equation, because there are farms who have people. So what do? They attract people, but we are not really attracting them. Something in that dynamics. We've been talking here in Vrindaban to attract a manager, right? And that's been like a long search. So something we need to adjust here. And Prabhupada was away in 76. This is our new app. We are registering all the projects and cow protection and other initiatives which have cows or may not have cows. There's around 99 so far. 84, the ones with cows, and around 99 altogether. We have so far registered somewhere like 3,600 of our cows. We believe we have 5,000. Tirupati is not here, has 500, that already takes it to 4,000. And there are many other projects which have not included their data. But this specific website is to register all the ISKCON goshalas and farms. At one click you can see how many cows, where, what are they doing, the names of the cows, everything is available. So that's a nice tool we're offering to the different farms. In the same letter, Prabhupada talks about the 14 farms. He talks about, can you read the second one? Mother Hari Krishna Das, please read the second one.
Letter to Maheshwara Das, 1976. We have got more than 100 temples all over the world, and attached to every temple, we are opening farms. And in many cities, restaurants. And all of them are going on very successfully.
His assessment, the report of Prabhupada, they're going successfully, and they were indeed. I hear from Ranika Prabhu that at one point this farm was producing 1,000 gallons a day. That was a major operation. And Gitanagari also was producing substantial. Maybe, as we discussed on Sunday, when you have the tour, we can go deeper into that. And Prabhupada was writing personally that, and he wrote a letter to Yashomatinanda, a famous letter we don't need to read. Our mission, where there is agriculture, there must be cows. So Prabhupada is connecting both. He's not separating. And he's suggesting that the whole idea is that ISKCON community be independent from outside help. Very important point. Prabhupada was saying, if we are strong, if we have enough food and nutrition in our body, that we don't depend outside, we can preach, we can do whatever we like. Doesn't matter if it collapses, the system, the president is this or that, we sustain. So that is his main mission. Our mission is to protect the devotees from unnecessary heavy work, to save time for advancing Krishna. Heavy work here refers to working a job, not working hard in the field.
Thanks for the clarification.
Because we think it's heavy work here, but think about living in that city, you know? You have to get traffic jam, and there's insurance, and there's this, and there's that, and all the things you have to do to keep yourself alive, what to speak of progressing. And then, yeah. But that poses a problem or a challenge for Vaishnava practitioners. And what is that challenge? To show a functional system. Because we have spoken about it, where is this system? What does it look like? Where is it? And if we look back at our last 50 years of existence, right? 40 rupees. That's why we started, Prabhupada in New York, right? Well, by 77, 108 centers. Actually, it was described 108 palaces. I heard in a lecture, it was quite interesting, because we had French palace and so many. It was quite a development in 14 years. 14 farms, 76. That's the statistics. 40 years later, okay, here we are, 40 years later. ISKCON has 650 centers approximately, that's what it said in the Centennial Research. 6 times, we grew 6 times, right? And we think that, oh, cow protection, nobody paid much attention to it. Well, 99 farms means we grew 7 times, more than the temples. The only difference, we start from a smaller number, and they start from a bigger number, so that's the difference. But now, the exponential rate we have to see, because there's so many devotees opening initiatives everywhere, as you mentioned. So that's not quantified. Like here, I just heard this morning, there's one, Sukha?
Sukava?
Yeah, Sukha. She was mentioned she has a vegetable garden, and she has a whole operation. Doesn't even come on the radar. Like her, there's so many doing things. There's people with cows, people with gardens. So, now, what is the vision for 2030? Let's say Prabhupada was looking from 76 into 2030. Well, by this ratio, we have 800 centers, and we'll have 125 farms and goshalas. In the next 11 years, there's a growth of maybe the Toronto farm will be established, and we have Soho Temple wanting a new farm, and we have different initiatives coming up. Montreal establishing a farm. So, by the rate, let's say like that. So, we'll expect to grow 14 times in 100 years. If we did 7 in 50, 14 times in 100 years. Just as a reference, the Amish people grew 20 times in 100 years. Every 100 years they grow 20 times. They started 5,000, today they're 300,000. But not 300,000 anyway, 300,000 people with an economy. With a family which is established and expanding. A minimum of 7 to 10 children is available in these families.
I was going to say, a lot of reproduction goes on.
A lot of reproduction and sustainable reproduction, because they can sustain themselves and keep going. So that's something for us to consider as a next point. But we need to be relevant. If we come to the world and say, all right, we are cow protectors, give us a donation and we'll protect the cow. That has a limited impact. Because imagine, at the rate of how many cows per year, per hour?
34,000.
Per hour. Okay, so 34,000 per hour versus the 5,000 we have managed to protect somehow in our institution. It's not very impressive. So if you say, okay, you give us $34,000 per hour and we protect all the cows of the world, that's not going to impress very much. So what is the process to do that? We need to be relevant. And one of the ideas which was very well discussed on the table recently was, what if the thing is to prove that the cow is more valuable alive than dead? Financially, economically, India is going on that track. Seriously, investing billions of dollars in Panchagavya, research, patenting, everything like that. Then we're not talking about Hare Krishna movement having some cows as we're discussing. We're talking about the bigger picture. That society understands, hey, wait a moment, cows means wealth. Really. And then they start evolving in that direction. For example, cow dung. We think of cow dung as Mother Lakshmi, do you? Yes? If there's a pile of gold and a pile of cow dung, which one do you get?
Cow dung.
Cow dung. Someone convict. Who else? Take the gold. Thank you.
If I want a garden, I want the cow dung, but if I want to buy a car, I want the gold. So it depends on what your goal is.
So there is a
Take both.
selective, take both. Here's a very nice comprehensive version. We take both. If they're both have some gold, we take both. Right? Yes, why not? Right? What's the loss? Yeah. But that conviction that the cow dung is really wealth still has to be crystallized. And when we were in GEN is Global Eco Village Network in Finhorn, Scotland. They have 10,000 eco villages connected to them. And these ladies, the CEO of the company. She gave us the training. We were there, Ajita Prabhu from Australia, Jimmy from New Vrindaban, other devotees. And she told us something amazing. Do you want to know what she told us? Yes or no?
Yes.
Why not? She said, I never imagined that you Hare Krishnas were so connected to cow protection. She said, you have a great tool in your hand, you're not using it. The whole world is discussing how to deal with global warming, residue disposals, and you have this intimate connection with the cows. You could have an answer. You have to explore that. Look at the Devamrita Swami gave me just recently. America, this is a methane factory from cow dung and different residues. Look at the size of the operation. And the question is, could renewable natural gas be the next big thing in green energy? They're exploring ideas, you know. So we shift from a small biogas unit for a family down to bigger system, and everybody starts to think about that. So that's the kind of thinking. What could we do with this? Yeah. And the GBC has given a guideline for us in ISKCON that by 2022, all ISKCON centers should develop a plan whereby all milk and milk products, butter, ghee, yogurt, etc., offered to the deities are procured from protected cows. So 2022, all ISKCON centers are mandated to have a plan, not to have the milk or dairy yet, but a plan how they do that. And that's a great push because cow protection now landed on the altar of all ISKCON centers with this resolution. And who is going to supply? That's a big question. Near Vrindaban. We both are in Vrindaban. Gitanagari. We need a lot of different ideas to supply all the deities. To start, what about the devotees? What about the children? What about the elderly? What about everyone? So it's a huge field which has to be expanded in thought and dimension. That's a system they're trying to do in Brazil. It's just a symbiosis between eucalyptus and cows. But you can see they caught the principle, but the purpose is wrong. The beef is cows for beef, and eucalyptus is just for cellulose. So they got the system, but the purpose is not right. It makes money, but it doesn't solve the problem. The most beautiful breeding program made by the Brazilian Agency of Development, they took the gear cows, they took to such a level. The Indian government is craving, is asking for help from the Brazilian agents to develop the Indian breeds. But it's not being used in the correct situation. If we show a better use, efficient in that system, we'll be heard. Yes? And because that's Krishna's system. What did he do every day? How many? 9 lakhs, 900,000. How? Look at the system. Really together. The cows are almost like one body walking together, right? Now, happy cows. This gentleman here is Ernest Gitt from Switzerland, I believe, or Austria, and he's in Brazil for the last 35 years. He is the father of syntropic farming. And his student, Tiago Barbosa, found the Hare Krishnas. He's living in Australia and he works for New Govardhan. And he's teaching syntropic farming there. And we are in connection and we want to develop a huge network of experts. He's already put himself as one of them. And on this room there are others, which we want to make it available. And here's Alan Savory, right? He developed the holistic management system, strip grazing, all those systems. And that's Brian, also in Australia, teaching them how to do that. So a question came, can we do something together? Yes, and here's the answer. Yes, we can. That's in Brazil. That's a syntropic agriculture system, but the middle is grazing. Remember I mentioned to you? Now just imagine if you have corridors of forest and they graze in the middle and you have strip grazing, the cattle are moving, you can have lakes in between. By the end of the day they went and they come back, then they go, come back. Becomes quite easy, especially for cows which are dry. You can just go on and minimize a lot of work. Plus there's so much nutrition on the side of different herbs, trees that they may utilize. It's a system to look at. We're trying to develop this system. That's something we're trying to look at. To do that, that's what we're doing here.